Marcus Hayes had worked as a night janitor at Riverside Elementary for 7 years, pushing his cleaning cart through empty hallways while most of the city slept. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from. At 42, his hands were rough from years of mopping floors and scrubbing desks, but his heart remained tender, shaped by the greatest joy and deepest sorrow of his life. His daughter, Lily. She was 8 years old, with soft brown curls and eyes that held an ocean of unspoken words. Lily hadn't spoken since she was 4, not since the car accident that took her mother's life and left. Lily trapped in silence. Doctors called it selective mutism, a response to trauma so deep that her voice had simply retreated into a place even she couldn't reach. Marcus had tried everything. From therapy sessions, they could barely afford to gentle encouragement at home. But Lily communicated only through drawings, and the occasional nod or shake of her head. Still, Marcus loved her fiercely and unconditionally, learning to read the language of her eyes and the stories she told with crayons on paper. Every night, Marcus brought Lily to work with him because he couldn't afford a babysitter and had no family nearby. She would sit quietly in the corner of whatever classroom he was cleaning, her small backpack beside her, drawing pictures while he worked. The school administration had initially hesitated, but Principal Morrison had a soft spot for hard-working people trying their best, and Lily never caused trouble. She was a ghost of a child, present but silent, watching the world with careful, observant eyes. Marcus would talk to her constantly as he worked, narrating his tasks, telling her stories about when her mother was alive, singing old songs off-key, just to fill the silence that had become their constant companion. He carried a small bottle of bubble solution in his pocket, something he'd discovered could make Lily smile on her hardest days. Whenever she seemed particularly withdrawn or sad, he would blow bubbles, and she would watch them float through the air with something close to wonder lighting her face. On a cold Tuesday evening in November, everything changed. Marcus was cleaning the main office when he heard an unusual sound, a woman's voice, clipped and professional, echoing from the conference room down the hall. He knew the building should be empty, except for him and Lily, so he walked quietly toward the sound, his curiosity piqued. Through the partially open door, he saw a woman in an expensive navy suit, her dark hair pulled back severely, speaking rapidly into a phone while gesturing at documents spread across the conference table. Beside her, looking small and lost in an oversized chair, sat a little girl about Lily's age. The child had the same dark hair as the woman, but where the woman radiated sharp efficiency, the girl seemed to be folding in on herself, her thin shoulders hunched, her hands gripping the edge of the chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Marcus recognized the signs of a child in distress. He'd seen them in Lily too many times not to notice. The woman, whose name he would later learn was Victoria Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies and one of the wealthiest women in the state, was in the middle of a crisis. Her company was facing a hostile takeover attempt, and she'd been working around the clock for weeks, barely seeing her daughter Sophie. Tonight, Sophie's nanny had called in sick at the last minute, and Victoria had no choice but to bring her daughter to this emergency meeting at the school, which doubled as a community center after hours for various corporate events. Sophie had been diagnosed with severe anxiety and panic disorder following her parents' bitter divorce the previous year. She rarely saw her father anymore, and her mother, though loving in her own way, was consumed by work. Sophie had learned to be quiet, to not make demands, to sit still and wait. But tonight something had broken inside her. The pressure, the loneliness, the endless waiting had become too much. Marcus watched as Sophie's breathing became rapid and shallow, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Victoria was too engrossed in her phone call to notice, pacing near the windows as she argued with someone about stock prices and shareholder votes. Then Sophie started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as she began to hyperventilate. Marcus didn't hesitate. He gently pushed the door open and walked in, his presence immediately drawing Victoria's attention. She looked annoyed at the interruption, covering her phone's microphone to snap at him. "What are you doing here?" "This is a private meeting," she said, her voice cold and dismissive. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. His eyes were on Sophie, and he recognized that look, the same desperate panic he'd seen in Lily's eyes on the worst nights after her mother died. "Ma'am, I think your daughter needs you right now," Marcus said quietly, his voice gentle but firm. Victoria glanced at Sophie, really looked at her for the first time in an hour, and saw the tears, the trembling, the fear. Something cracked in her polished exterior. She abruptly ended her call and moved toward Sophie, but she seemed unsure what to do, how to bridge the distance that had grown between them. Marcus knelt down beside Sophie's chair, moving slowly so as not to startle her. "Hey there," he said softly. "My name is Marcus, and I have a little girl just like you. Sometimes when she's feeling scared or sad, we do something special. Would you like to see?" Sophie didn't respond verbally, but her eyes flickered toward him, a small acknowledgement. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the bottle of bubble solution, the same one he used for Lily. Victoria watched, her business mind struggling to comprehend what this janitor thought he was doing. But something kept her silent. Marcus dipped the wand and blew gently, sending a stream of shimmering bubbles floating into the air. They caught the fluorescent light and drifted lazily around the room, each one a tiny rainbow. Sophie's breathing began to slow as she watched them, her focus shifting from her internal panic to the simple beauty of the bubbles. Marcus blew more, creating a cascade of them, and then he did something unexpected. He started talking to Sophie, not about her feelings or what was wrong, but about the bubbles themselves. "You know, my daughter Lily and I have a theory that every bubble carries a wish," he said, blowing another cluster. "The trick is to make your wish before the bubble pops. If you're really lucky, the wish floats all the way up to the stars before it bursts. And then you know it'll come true." Sophie's breathing had almost normalized now, and she was watching the bubbles with genuine interest. "What kind of wishes?" she whispered, the first words she'd spoken all evening. Marcus smiled. "Any kind you want. Lily always wishes for small things. A sunny day, a good dream, that her dad doesn't burn breakfast." Sophie's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Victoria stood frozen, watching this janitor, this stranger, do what she hadn't been able to do in months. Reach her daughter. Calm her, make her feel safe. She felt a mixture of gratitude and shame washing over her. How had she let things get so bad that a school janitor understood her daughter's needs better than she did? Marcus continued blowing bubbles and talking softly to Sophie, and slowly, gradually, the girl's posture relaxed. Her hands released their death grip on the chair. The terror faded from her eyes. After a few more minutes, Marcus stood up and gestured toward the door. "I have someone I'd like you to meet, if that's okay with your mom," he said. Victoria nodded, unable to find words. Marcus led them down the hall to the classroom where Lily waited, still drawing at a desk. "Lily, this is Sophie. Sophie, this is my daughter Lily. Lily doesn't talk much, but she's the best listener I know, and she loves to draw. Maybe you two could draw together while your mom finishes her work." What happened next was something Marcus had never seen before. Lily looked up at Sophie, and something passed between the two girls. A recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who both carried heavy burdens. Lily pushed a piece of paper and some crayons toward Sophie and began to draw. Sophie sat down beside her and picked up a crayon. No words were spoken, but the two girls began creating a picture together, passing colors back and forth, adding to each other's work in perfect silent harmony. Victoria watched, tears threatening to break through her carefully maintained composure. "Thank you," she whispered to Marcus. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." Marcus shrugged. "Just did what any parent would do. These kids, they don't need much sometimes. Just someone to see them, really see them, and show them they matter." That night was the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Victoria couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about how a janitor making minimum wage had shown more emotional intelligence and genuine care than anyone in her highly paid executive team. She learned Marcus's story over the following weeks, stopping by the school in the evenings to bring Sophie, ostensibly for the quiet space to work, but really so Sophie could spend time with Lily. She learned about his struggles as a single father, working a job that barely covered rent, and Lily's therapy sessions. How he'd given up his dreams of becoming a teacher because he couldn't afford the education while raising a daughter alone. She learned that he volunteered at the food bank on weekends and had a gift for connecting with people, especially children. That was simply extraordinary. And in turn, Marcus learned about Victoria's own pain, how success in business had come at the cost of presence in her daughter's life, how her marriage had crumbled under the weight of two ambitious people who forgot to prioritize love, how she was drowning in guilt and didn't know how to fix what felt irreparably broken. The girls' friendship blossomed in those quiet evening hours. They developed their own language of drawings and gestures, creating elaborate stories with crayons and construction paper. Sophie's anxiety attacks became less frequent, and incredibly miraculously, Lily began to make small sounds, humming along when Marcus sang, whispering single words to Sophie when they played. It was as if each girl had found in the other permission to heal at their own pace. Victoria watched her daughter transform, becoming more confident, more joyful, more like the child she'd been before the divorce. And she realized that money couldn't buy what Marcus had given Sophie for free: her genuine care, patient presence, and unconditional acceptance. 6 months after that first night, Victoria made a decision that shocked her board of directors. She created a foundation dedicated to supporting single parents and mental health services for children, with Marcus as its director. She insisted that he was uniquely qualified, not despite his lack of formal credentials, but because of his profound understanding of what struggling families actually needed. Marcus was hesitant at first, feeling unworthy, but Victoria was adamant. "You saved my daughter," she told him. "You showed me that success means nothing if you're failing the people who matter most. Let me give you the resources to help other families the way you helped mine." Marcus accepted, and the foundation became his life's work, creating programs that provided affordable childcare, therapy services, and support networks for single parents across the city. But the greatest change came in the relationship between the two families. Victoria and Marcus became partners in more than just the foundation. They became friends, supporting each other through the challenges of single parenthood, learning from each other's strengths. Victoria taught Marcus about long-term planning and financial stability. Marcus taught Victoria about being present, about reading the unspoken needs of a child, about love that shows up in small moments rather than grand gestures. And the girls, Lily and Sophie, became inseparable sisters in everything but blood. When Lily finally spoke her first full sentence after 4 years of silence, it was to Sophie, and her words were simple but profound. "You're my best friend." Sophie hugged her and whispered back, "You're mine too." 2 years later, Marcus and Victoria stood together at the Foundation's annual gala, watching Lily and Sophie perform a piano duet they'd learned together. Both girls had come so far from those frightened children they'd once been. Lily was now talking regularly, even beginning to sing in the school choir. Sophie's anxiety was managed, and she'd grown into a confident, compassionate girl who volunteered alongside her mother at the foundation. Victoria leaned over to Marcus and said, "Do you remember that night, when you walked into the conference room with those bubbles?" Marcus smiled. "How could I forget? It changed everything." Victoria nodded. "You taught me that family isn't about perfection, or wealth, or having all the answers. It's about showing up, being present, and loving unconditionally, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Marcus took her hand, and in that moment, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by their work, watching their daughters play music together, they both understood that they'd found something rare and precious. A chosen family built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had grown from the most unexpected of beginnings. The story of the janitor who blew bubbles to calm A billionaire's daughter became something of a legend in their city, a reminder that kindness recognizes no economic boundaries and that sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected sources. Marcus never forgot his roots, continuing to volunteer and staying connected to the community he'd always served. Victoria used her resources to amplify his vision. People from different worlds choose to see each other's humanity, to learn from each other rather than judge, to lead with compassion rather than ego. Extraordinary things become possible. And every night when Marcus tucked Lily into bed, and Victoria did the same with Sophie, both fathers and mothers whispered the same message their daughters had taught them: that healing is possible, that love comes in many forms, and that family is whoever shows up for you when you need them most. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of simple kindness and unconditional love, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories for more inspiring tales that celebrate the extraordinary goodness in ordinary people.